Fat Literature with hosts Nathalie Handal and Gabrielle David at the Langston Hughes Library. Coming up next on Fat Literature, co-host Shirley Bradley LeFlore and special guest professor-critic Maryemma Graham pay tribute to the great American poet Margaret Walker in Rivers of Women, featuring visual artist Michael Singletary. Funding for Fat Literature has been provided by the Langston Hughes Community Library and Cultural Center of the Queensborough Public Library and its funders. Additional funding for Fat Literature was also provided by the Intercultural Alliance of Artists and Scholars Incorporated and its funders. Fat Literature's website is made possible in part by Queens Council on the Arts, with support through J.P. Morgan Chase Arts and Culturally Grants Program, with special thanks to our individual donors and viewers like you.
To be or not to be? That's not the question.
It's fact. It's fact.
It's fact.
It's literature, it's poetry, it's the spoken word, diversity for all to hear. It's fact.
It's fact.
Fact literature.
You have just been so excited about putting together this project on Margaret Walker. Why don't you tell us a little bit why you think it's important to?
Well, I think Margaret is really one of the pioneers and icons for African American writers, period. But for the African American woman, she has really stood out. She has, her life has basically been one that identifies with the working woman, the mother, the wife, the artist, and the struggle it takes to do that, as well as being an academician for years. I think her struggle has been a very human struggle in terms of her life, on the job, in the home, the challenge of sickness, just the whole literary world. And her history is very rich. Her relationship with Richard Wright, her writing at a young age, having been born in Birmingham, and later moving to New Orleans, but also having her father's church sponsor, Langston Hughes, coming there for the first time, when everybody thought his fee of $25 was too much. Her father said, we'll bring him, because he belonged, they were African Methodist Episcopal, AME. So that was very important to keep the culture alive. And I think a lot has not been said about Margaret.
True. I mean,
I think we talk about all the other people that are higher profile, but none could be higher than Margaret, simply because she influenced so many young people in terms of being their instructor, one of whom is here today. She respected intelligence. She respected history and our culture as Black people.
well, let me ask you something. Because when we take this break, we're going to introduce Maryemma Graham,
Yes.
who worked with Margaret Walker, who you haven't seen in like over 20 years. But I wanted you to share with the audience, if you can remember a few lines from Rivers of Women, that why you named this particular program.
I did, and I would like to share that.
Just a couple of lines, just a taste.
Well, I've known women, rivers of women. Blue, black, tan, high, yellow, blue vein women. River crossing women, waters deep as the Nile, Mississippi is mud, seaboard and island ocean women. Women who ride the waves and balance the tide. Swimming women. Water walking women, treading water, floating women, going with the flow women, backstroking, jellyfishing, mud crawling women. I know women who've drowned, sinking women who sleep at the bottom of the water. And it's a long piece, but I thought about people like Margaret being in the bend of that river sometimes when we needed safety.
We were talking about how you didn't know that there was a path that Margaret Walker was putting you on. And so through this time forward, after meeting her and going to Mississippi, you began getting involved with her work. So just talk a little bit about working with her on those last two books and what's compelled you to continue on with that legacy.
Well, I think that she saw in me a scholar. I had started that path when I was at Northwestern studying under her. And she had great respect for me as a scholar. And if I ever had any questions about it, she reminded me that that was the job that I was supposed to do. I needed to be a scholar. We had enough other people doing other stuff, and I needed to be a scholar. And I heard that, but I think I heard it louder when I went to teach in Mississippi. And I realized that she could not finish the work that she needed to do. And she had the Richard Wright book. We had to do the research for that book. We just about finished that. She wanted her collected poems to be out. This is My Century, which was her newly collected poems, because we had not seen that kind of poetry since the first volume in 1942, For My People, which made her famous. So we got the collected poems out. And then there were the essays. From This Is My Century was the poetry, but we also, on Being Female, Black, and Free, was a especially important volume for her, because she wanted something to say. She wanted to say something to a new generation of women. What does it mean to be her kind of woman in the 20th century? And what does she have to say to other young women emerging who would live into the new century? Because she was always very fond of saying she was not going to live to see the next century. She knew that. She knew that very clearly. So by the 1980s, there was work to be done. She might not live to finish it, so someone had to take over, and clearly I was the person assigned to that task. So the two collections of essays on being female, black, and free, and how I wrote Jubilee, because the journey to that book was important for her. It took her 30 years to write it. The book was in 1966. It was her grandmother's story. It was a great oral history tradition in visibility for us. So Margaret really had a lot of work to do and not enough time to do it in.
You know, it almost sounds like your relationship with her is almost like to Gwendolyn Brooks.
Very much like that. I learned by the time she was really aging and not feeling well, I knew how to finish her sentences.
Wow. I read that somewhere. I read that in one of your articles.
I could give her something that I finished and she'd say, did I write that or did you write this? Because she would give me the beginning of it and I knew how to finish it because we needed to get finished. We couldn't wait until she felt better to get it done. It needed to be done now. So we started working together and that collaboration was very effective. It was very efficient.